Jesus' true teachings. I had to struggle with it, but eventually people started to believe me. I have some brothers and sisters who are like, "You're crazy," but I respect them and love them. John's life prior to remembering his past memories was very much a Catholic one, but as time went on, his mom encouraged him to go find out what he believed in. He studied atheism and Buddhism and came to a realization that he believed in a God. When I was a Renaissance Festival entertainer, I did a comedy show called Hack and Slash, and we did sword fights all over the world. At a party in Canada, a woman kept staring at me and said, "You walk with Jesus, right?" A psychic gave me a reading that basically started talking about the fact that I walked with Jesus in a past life, and I was like, okay, but the weird part was, on an odd level, it just kind of felt like it was true. I avoided her for the next several weeks, and then a friend of mine told me I was John the Beloved. I was shocked and thought she was talking about somebody else, entirely different, somebody new. I was walking along the line where all the readers were when a woman stopped one of her readings, ran out in the aisle, grabbed me by the arm and told me that I was John Beloved. It got to the point where I thought I was going crazy. I bought a book called Edgar Cayce on the Millennium and instantly started searching for a psychotherapist who did past life regressions. I wanted a real psychotherapist, a hypnotherapist who cattle regress me to the past. I found a lady in Virginia who led me through a meditation so I could get used to her voice, and then the following week she led me into a hypnosis session. I opened my eyes and had a huge visceral experience. YS wore robes, right to sell held a little, I thought, but later discovered that what I was wearing was known as a fish coat. It was like a Galilean one-piece bathing suit. I was sitting here having this whole experience when I looked at people running down the beach in front of me. I went over to a crowd and pushed my way to the center of the crowd and felt this feeling of just pure unconditional love. I had a near-death experience where I left the illusion of here and ended up in a pure white expanse. The regressionist confused me, left me in that state for 7 or 8 minutes, and then said the next most important moment was to feel and experience all my fears and anxieties, and had a complete realization that to come to the physical world to feel that separation from that love is necessary. In a regression, one of the things that they do is take the person to the end of the life so that they can have an experience, a physical experience, an emotional experience, so they can go, "Oh, this is real." The woman who led me to the end of the life did not realize that I was also John of old, and that I was reincarnated. It doesn't matter who you were, it only matters who you are in the here. I just went to the crucifixion, and in my regression, you hear me screaming and overwhelmed. I started writing down details, and later on I discovered that they were pretty accurate, like the nails going through his ankle bones sideways. John was walking with Jeshua and came back with some information that he can research. He decided to make this information public because he believes it will help others deal with their fears and anxieties. When you say that you had a spiritual awakening, a near-death experience, or a psychic reading, people around you clear the room. How did you deal with it psychologically? For a long time, I didn't want to talk about past lives because I didn't want to be the guy who thought he was Napoleon. But eventually, people started to ask me about it, and my family took it very interestingly. My mom was completely open to my spiritual path, but didn't necessarily share that with me. She went to her Catholic priest, who was straight from Ireland, hair parted down the middle, and said that it might be true. What people portray in public is very different than what they portray in private. This is true in all segments of society. 20 years ago, a book was written about me called John of Old, John of New. The book is still on Amazon. I was speaking all over the country, but no one was listening. So I decided to put a different vocabulary around it and start going to people who needed to be put on a path. And I would do these really cool speeches, like bringing the most timid person in the audience on stage. After the speech, people would come up to me and thank me, and then a group would stand to the side and say, "I know what you're talking about." We hide our spirituality for the sake of being afraid of being different, but in reality, we're afraid of not being loved in some form. The Buddha said that the secret to enlightenment is the eradication of fear, and in Sufism, life is the struggle against the veil, which is our fear. Fear is an emotional reaction to a future event that may or may not happen with you focused on a negative outcome. When you shift your focus from negative to positive, you create a whole different experience. Most people in the world sit in their present moment and hash over all of the fearful things that have happened in their life. They decide this is the way the world is, and they create more of that. The people who step into the next levels of their soul start to negate the subconscious beliefs that are behind them and focus on a positive outcome. Most people think that they're going through time on a linear fashion, but we don't go through time, we live in the present moment. When we focus on a positive, such as I am joyfully receiving perfect health, we bring that reality into focus. You know, I have watched people believe themselves out of wheelchairs, and a lady who had a tumor started putting positive affirmations in the patois affirmation, and her tumor shrank. It really comes down to each one of us as divine, and we are one with God. Alex, I have a couple questions for you, because I don't get to speak often with someone who walked with Jeshua as a general statement, but the biggest question I always have is because I am also a recovering Catholic. The Bible that we know of today is a conglomeration and an edit from a lot of books at the Nicene Council, and nobody Jesus was the virgin birth was miraculous, right? All the other virgin births you find in history are all Roman on pagan mythology. Joshua was born, I remember him as a man, and he was the coolest dude ever. When I met him in that past life, I had a full understanding that he had just come back from somewhere far away, and his teachings didn't tie into Judaism or Christianity. I avoided the scenes where they wanted him to take the role of Messiah and King, because he wouldn't do it. But I totally believe he was in India, and I personally hope that's true. Did Jesus resurrect? I have memories of him on the cross, of carrying his physical body to a tomb, and I have a distinct mnemonic of going to the Garden Tomb in Israel. I remember the second reading the psychic did a full body trance channel, and at one point she said, "Do you see me?" I closed my eyes and saw Jeshua laughing at me, and I knew the reason I was on my face, because I put him in a tomb. I have a statue of Jeshua meditating in my office, because I truly believe that he was a yogi and learned the ideas that he was talking about from the Hindu texts and the Indian yogic philosophies. Finding love in any religion is heresy, but I had an experience and got very public with it. I have never had a Buddhist, Hindu, Muslim, or wicked or high-sounding negative say anything negative to me, and I have never been told that I'm doing the devil's work by Christians, because that's what Jesus would want, you either believe in Jesus or die. But the Old Testament says God sent 2 bears to kill 42 children because they made fun of a bald man. The original texts of the Bible were written by Judaic sects who had their own agenda. The Aramaic Gospel that people talk about is a translation into Aramaic from Greek, and the years are wrong because Joshua was born in the Middle Ages. Even our concept of hell is a reflection of Dante's Inferno, which is a Middle Ages text. The word Gehenna, which was translated into hell, was actually a trash dump where you burned your trash on the outskirts of Jerusalem and all the bad stuff was burned in Ghana. As a parent, you look at your kids and you think, there's nothing they could ever do to deserve eternal damnation. Can you imagine God going and saying, you didn't go to church on Sunday, and you want me Friday? When people come at you negatively, ask what they're afraid of. You can always find it in the people who are judging you or judging you because they're afraid they're wrong. If you are right, then everything that you've built your life upon is wrong, and if that's challenged, then your entire world comes crumbling down. That's in politics, that's in religion, that's in just what you eat. When you are open-minded and doesn't have as much fear, you could go, well, wait a minute and see if reincarnation is possible. It kind of makes more sense because if you only got one life to live, and then it sucks. When I was out speaking 20 years ago, my first regression was in 1999, and the reason I stopped was because people could only be into who I was as opposed to stepping into the divinity. When I came back to this a year and a half ago, I was blown away at the shift in humanity. They forgave him in 1986, the same year Ferris Bueller's Day Off came out, and Big Trouble in Little China, which is a very spiritual movie in its own. But they were all looking at a different side of the elephant. You can find love in all religions, in all walks of spirituality, as long as you don't condemn or judge. I know a Catholic priest who helps transition souls who are lost over to the other side. The Catholic faith really leveraged fear for many years, and while still does right lobbying, I grew up in Rehoboth Beach, Delaware, which is known as the nation's gay summer capital, and I saw preach coming out of Gay Boyer's handed amateur boyfriend. I wanted to tap into what you just said, that love can be found everywhere, and that the universal thoughts and the universal truths can be found everywhere. If you trap yourself into one school of thought, you are missing the beautiful enormity and simplicity of God. I've had almost 200 conversations like this, and I'm starting to notice common truths, like God is love, and the concept of reincarnation keeps coming up. We're here to learn, to experience, to remember why we're here, what we truly are. Karma is what you're showing you're reaping, but you can sow something new in every present moment. I think New Age dogma is just as pervasive as Old Age dogma. Ely, the word meditation is so convoluted, and I don't call it meditation anymore. I call it sitting in love, and I exhale, and I feel that space, and next, it's 40 minutes later, and I've been in this beautiful bliss state for 40 minutes. When we're in fear, we go, gasping for air while we're filling our lungs up, so we can run fast. But if we take an actor on stage, they're literally trained to exhale, relax all their muscles, and shut off the fear response. When I do private sessions with people, I do 4 or 5 a day sometimes, and I get them to focus on a positive outcome and create something different by the end of the sessions. Jesus would go off for long periods of time and sit on his own, and I would consider that a meditation. When you were talking earlier about using the word demon or whatever, you said that the word Satan has 2 separate big dictionary meanings. I think that's really interesting, because our Satan is our own temptations, and so to me, it really comes down to you gotta meditate to come to a closer place. I've been meditating for 5 years now, and I've gone from a mess to a place where I don't know where I am. I've spoken to Tibetan monks and Buddhist monks who meditate long periods, and they say everyone could do it. I attribute most of my big, spiritual light show experiences to my naivete. One of them was when I had a kundalini rising in a tent in New Orleans, when I felt the heat of the towels beyond my physical body. I was freezing my butt off in a tent in New Orleans, so I focused on my feet and got it up to my shins, but it wouldn't go any higher. Then I heard a thought that said to relax into it, and I just exhaled and flew. I had a cooling riser before I had my regression, and I realized that I didn't have to try to have one. I just had to believe that I was joyfully receiving, and I started the practice again the next night. In the process of bringing the heat up, I heard the zipper of the tent open, and I watched my comedy partner step into the tent. I looked at my own face, and he said, "Did you hear the humming noise?" I forgot my arm and couldn't turn off the alarm clock when I woke up. I realized my arm was here, but my other hand was smacking over there, and I'm going to tell you a funny story. I was doing this technique, bringing the warmth up my body, and I got out of bodies consistently. One night I went to my old hometown, Rehoboth Beach, and I ended up going to my friend's Beau's house, and I projected the thought that if he said it to me, I would call them. The key to everything I just said is my belief. When you look at the wall, the air between you and the wall, and the eyes that you're looking at it with, are all pure energy events in motion. We both ordered steaks, and our salads came out looking like my mother had picked each leaf. However, the steaks were cut into 4 parts, and the center was frozen. The simulation theory, Maya, the illusion, all that kind of stuff, is a concept that is fascinating to me, and people can heal themselves by their beliefs, even though science hates it and doesn't understand it. Some people might think that the ideas we're talking about sound woo-woo, but they've been around for thousands of years and have been taken over by more of this woo-woo kind of vibe. When you say you're hungry, your stomach growls, you yawn when you're tired, you're already creating your experience. You are already divine, you are already doing it. Joshua understood that he was bringing his experience into his own experience, and that he had to put all 3 elements, thought, word, and deed, into action, until finally could culminate into a wine. Near-death experiences are a review of your life, and you hear the feelings of the people you interacted with. I believe that when you cross over, you have to transition through your belief and out of your belief, and then you're folded back into the oneness of God. People ask me about the Trinity all the time, and I believe that we are the Holy Spirit. When we tap into our divine self, we connect with the other individuals in the parks of oneness, and so we get information from our divine self. I had one time and I literally said, I don't know why I'm supposed to say this, but you're truly scrumptious, to this lady. She said, oh my, she's well, let me tell you what you're talking about. My husband used to saying you're truly scrumptious to me. To go back to what you said earlier, I thought that the wine that Jesus parlor trick is a yogic power, and that the resurrection of Christ is that which is within you, which is a mind. John is asked what he thinks about what's going on in the world today. He answers that there seems to be a lot of crazy, but at the same time, there seems to be an awakening. You've heard a lot of name-calling the past several years, you've heard a lot of lack of agenda, but the world is a predominantly positive place, and most people don't realize that. If you commute to work every day, you pass 1,000 cars. There's loving stories every day, but we don't focus on them because our society is really based on the fact that fear sells. Even Catholicism is based upon marketing fear for recruitment. Me started, then First Communion, then cognitive thinking years, then confession, then hormones kick in, then they say if you have a predilection for the opposite sex, you should get married and have more babies with original sin, then become a priest or a nun. I'm not trying to bash Greek Catholicism, because I have met beautiful loving people, but the cycle of fears is really. And then like, in 1830, Minister Darby talked to a Scottish boy about a dream he had, and then he started writing it all down. When I went to Egypt in 2000, I was treated like an absolute prince. The manager of the hotel that I was staying at brought me his coat because he thought it would be cold up on Mount Sinai. Everyone is treating me like an apprentice, and people want to fight me. I have no idea why, but what we put out into the world is exactly what we get in return. The waitress story I told you earlier, the 2 negative people, 1 positive person, the 2 positive people, 1 negative person. It really is up to us to leave a positive week behind us, and we can do that by making our part of the world so bright. I don't know if you looked at my stuff, but my readings are $50 off, and you can share a link with your audience if they're interested. But only if you're interested.